All right, so in this video, we're going to talk about feature sections of layouts. Now, if you're designing a website or an app that is trying to convince a user to buy a product or service, then these features or these benefit sections are extremely helpful and obviously inform the user about what benefits or features that are associated with this product or service. So typically, these sections have usually at least 3 different features or benefits, and each feature or benefit section has usually at least 2 key elements. First is going to be a label or a description of some sort, and then the second is an icon, an illustration of some sort, or even a photograph. So I'm going to do a bunch of layout variations that can show you just the most common patterns for these feature sections that you can see in landing pages. So let's go ahead and I'm going to take the frame tool. We'll just work in desktop. Now remember, here later on in this whole curriculum, we're going to talk about making all of these various layouts that we're doing in desktop also responsive so that they work in tablet and mobile devices essentially. But for now, we're just going to work in the desktop section. So we're just going to stick with a white background. I do want to increase the contrast, so I'm going to take select the frame and then just take our background here, or select this part rather, sorry, in the background and change it to something that's just dark right there. And let's get started. So what we'll do is we're just going to assume this is for a fictional business for a running shoe. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm just going to get a title. We're going to use a title or a label and also a description for each one of these feature sections, of which we will have 3. So for a running shoe, maybe comfortability is one of the features that are associated with this particular product. So we're going to put in just a label, comfortability. All right, and we'll just use Poppins for this. And we're going to make it bold and bump up the size maybe to around 22. And that's pretty good right there. And then we'll duplicate this and we'll make this regular because we want to establish that typographic visual hierarchy. And maybe we'll choose somewhere around 18 or so, or maybe 17 for the actual description. So for the description, I'm just going to paste in what I have here. This is just something I made up. And go back to around 17 or so. And for the description, we want to make these, for this initial demonstration, is going to be basically a 2-column approach for each one of the feature sections. So we're going to bring this in somewhere right around here. And notice all this white space I'm utilizing. I'm not putting things over here or like right up here. We're giving a lot of room to breathe. Okay, so now let's maybe slightly reduce this line height. And let's, for this 2-column approach, let's right align these 2 elements. So we're going to select that and choose right justification there. And then on the right side, we'll have a photograph. Now remember, I said you can use an illustration or a photograph or an icon, and I'll show you differences here in a second. But for now, we're going to start with an actual photograph of some sort. So for this here in Figma, we'll choose the shape of the rectangle, and we'll just kind of draw out a shape kind of roughly around this size just to start off with. And then we're going to right click with that selected and go to plugins and then go to Unsplash. And then we'll choose search and search for shoe. All right, so let's go ahead and choose, let's just choose this red one right here. And by the way, when you select this, if you choose image and you change this from fill to crop, it will give you the option to kind of move it around and kind of just position it as you wish. You can also increase the size by holding shift, and you could just have the ability to adjust where that photograph sits within that frame. All right, so right here it looks actually pretty good. Notice in terms of how I'm aligning this, I kind of want it to be in the center of this element right here. So where we essentially have equal white space above where the title is and also below where the description is. And so this is actually something that looks pretty good. Now, you want to make sure things are lined up and not make assumptions. So you can hit Shift R to get out the rulers, make sure everything is lined up where it needs to be. All right, so a real simple way to continue this, let's say we want to have 3 more. We can go ahead and let's take this and pull it down so we have more room. We'll duplicate that, Control D, and then Control D that as well. And then we can take each one of these. We'll go to Unsplash. We'll search for shoe once again. And maybe this time we'll use that one. We'll get rid of the current one and let's see if we choose this one. All right, and that works. Okay, so what I will do real quickly is just kind of at least just paste in this information just to make these a little bit more unique. That was a different size, so we're going to go back to 22. And we'll realign these. Oops. We'll realign these up here in a second. Remember, we'll go to Shift R, pull this out, and make sure that these are all lined up. All right, so here is a real basic features section. Now, of course, some feature sections, they might actually have a button underneath each one of these, like where they can read more, and we'll also do a variation that includes that. But this right here looks perfectly fine. So if we want to center it, it's by selecting everything. There we go. There's nothing wrong with this, but I want to show you a bunch of other considerations in terms of layout. Sometimes you'll see instead of everything being on the left column like this in terms of all the type, it might zigzag back and forth. So let's create a variation that works in that capacity. And this one's a little bit more difficult to get correct. Usually you'll have to involve resizing some of these elements. So let me show you what I mean. So if we take this element right here, and let's put it just like right here for a second, and we take this one over here, and then we go ahead and let's left align this. It kind of just looks a little bit strange with this occurring here. It doesn't look entirely bad, but you want to make sure, whatever you do, that you have an equal amount of white space so that things are consistent. So like this right here is not consistent in terms of white space. But now we've just corrected for that and fixed that potential issue. Now you could possibly take this section right here and put it right here. But now it kind of just looks funky. There's not enough white space up here compared to here. We could push this over to create an equal amount of white space on here on the left and right, and then maybe push this over here. But still, I'm not quite a fan of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale things down a little bit and put a lot of white space between elements. So I'm going to put this right here. And then what I can do is we can take this size, we can look at the width and height, which is 430 by 245, and we can 430, 245, do the same thing, and we can kind of align all this stuff here on the same column and do the same thing over here and also increase the white space. So now if we take this to 430 by 245, all right, and just continue lining things up correctly and consistently. And now we have what I think is a better approach for how things have been aligned. And of course, you could experiment with kind of moving things in closer if you want to make these different changes. You could also take these out and extend them. However, when you do that, you want to make sure that you change this to fill, and then you can drag them out without issues. So let's do that for this one. Let's change that first to fill, of course. And a front-end developer who's using CSS would be able to use CSS to fit those in properly, consistent with the mockup. Oh, this is already filled, so we can just move that over. And there we go. So here's another option. So I wouldn't say one is objectively 100% better than the other, but you do have options in terms of your layout. And really it's just a matter of experimenting, showing it to the stakeholders, seeing what their opinion is. And you could also even bring it to the visitors, the users as well, and perform split testing and things of that nature. So let's also talk about what if we wanted to, for instance, use illustrations instead of photographs. So we can completely do that, no problem. So what we'll do is delete these, and I'm going to use a great resource to find all of these potential illustration resources. If you're not an illustrator yourself, of course, UI design is completely a different subject than illustration design. So if you want to find designs that other people have created, this is a great resource right here, appydev.co/illustrations. So the one that I've decided to use, if I can remember, is right here called Many Pixels. So we click on that. We can do a search for fitness. And if you do use illustrations and you're using them, you're using multiple illustrations, you don't want to mix different types of illustrations that perhaps are from different designers with different styles. You want to keep it consistent. So if you're going to be using outline illustrations, perhaps like this, you want to stick within that type of style. You don't want to mix and match like something like this fitness one with this fitness one over here, which is kind of just designed in a different aesthetic. So consistency is very important. So let's just transform idea from a shoe sort of fictional business to something that has to do with fitness. There's just not enough icons I was able to find that have to do with shoes. So let's choose, we'll choose this one. You can just click on this, you can download the SVGs, and I've already downloaded those. And then we'll choose also perhaps this one and then this one. So these three right here, and I'm just gonna drag them over here. All right, so here's the first one. Now let's just get these positioned up. I think maybe what I'll do is increase these a little bit. That way they're a little bit larger in terms of height based on these two elements. So it'll fill out things a little bit. So in terms of where you position these things, in terms of alignment and also scale, it's quite important because there is such thing as just too small. That is objectively, I would say, too small. And then also such thing as just too large. So you want to find a happy medium that will make this work. I'd say right around here looks pretty good. Okay, and then we can drag in another one. All right. Now again, notice there's something off about these two. This one is noticeably smaller because we haven't yet increased that one from its default size. So there's an inconsistency here that kind of throws things off. So we can increase that. We may want to increase the white space because this is pretty close here. So we can move this down and perhaps move this up a little bit. And then we can also move this down, and we'll also put in the third one. And again, you can play around with the alignment to get to something that you think looks pretty good. And of course, there's a good degree of subjectivity when it concerns these topics. So you can also really experiment by modifying, especially SVG graphics. You have the ability to double click in here and change colors, strokes, and all that good stuff. For me personally, I feel like this design is a little bit loose looking right here. I'm not quite a fan of it. So one thing we can do is we can add to it. We can add to these illustrations using our shape tools. So if we choose the ellipse tool and we choose something right around there, and what we'll want to do is get that out and get it underneath everything. Then what we can do is we can take a color that exists inside of here. You could leave it like that. So now we've kind of created a nice vibrant section here. You could also, taking the ellipse again, using the same hue, leaving it exactly where it's at in this little hue selector right here, we could just come over here, we can add tint, which is adding brightness, and we can also add tone, which is adding gray. So tint alone would be just right here, adding it right here at the very top. Adding a little tone can also desaturate it a little bit, so it's not quite as colorful. So we could do that. So I personally like this, and then we can take this and duplicate it by Control D, and then just moving it behind this element. So again, make sure we come over here and drag it down, and then we'll position it with your keyboard arrows. And we can do the same thing again, position it over here, move it out, and then move it maybe around here, and just get it positioned to where you like it. So now we have a different aesthetic here. I would say this is a little bit more minimalistic. All right, and we can also experiment with the colors. So let's do that real quick. We can make each one of these sections their own unique little color. And of course, this all has to do with the branding associated with the product or the service and the company itself. But this is one of those things that, depending on how many people are working on the project, a identity designer who's responsible for the brand might tell you we need to add color to this, we need these specific colors. Or if you're just a one-man show, you might be making these decisions yourself. So here's how we can add color. So let's say for this one, we're going to use, let's just use like this type of blue right here, 0085FF. And then we can take and change the ellipse to this blue, but just add that same tint and tone. And then double click and choose the vest, because that's the only colored portion that exists here. And we can just change that to our recently selected colors. All right, and then we could do the same sort of thing with this one. Maybe we'll change this here to this green. Again, we'll take the ellipse 2, hold I, select this color, and then tint and tone it as well. Double click, select her vest, and choose a recently used color right here. All right, and then finally, we'll use yet another color. And this is going to be our last example right here in that purple. And we will take this, let's come down and choose our ellipse 3. You know the drill at this point. And we'll choose our recently used color here. So now you can see, playing around with the colors, we just add more vibrancy and life to the design. Now, is that something that you should do every single time? No, it entirely depends on the brand itself. So let's also see about adding more information to each one of these feature sections here. What if we want to have a button? How will that change the layout? All right, well, we have quite a bit of white space here, and we also have some space available to us to work around and add another element. So we can move this up and then move the whole thing up a little bit. And then let's add a button, such as one that says View More. And this doesn't necessarily have to be bold. So let's just leave it at regular. And we'll look at the size of our type here at 17 up there. We can make this 17 as well. And let's create a button background. And we'll put that underneath. We'll add about 4 points of border radius. And maybe we'll use a color here. And maybe we'll use an icon with a right arrow. So we'll choose Iconify, arrow, and we have one selected already, so I'll choose that. Drag that in. And we'll position this to the top, or we could just right click and choose bring to front. There we go. And maybe we'll scale this down a bit. Let's give ourselves a little bit more room. Get this aligned up. All right, so here's a button that can work. Of course, you have different types of button designs that would also work. You can go with an outline approach. Let's see what that would look like. We can take this and we can just hide the fill for now, add an outline. I would not use a complete black outline. I think it just kind of just distracts a little bit and takes away from the design. So we can take down the opacity, or we could change the color. Let's choose the blue color here that we're using, and then also maybe just experiment with it. Maybe right around here. It has a little bit of the color. It's pretty gray, it's pretty toned, and it's on the lighter side, so it doesn't contrast a ton. So this could work as well. But I think I'm just going to go ahead and hide that. We'll go with this original approach. And we'll take this, right click, we can create a component, duplicate it, and then position it here. We can change the background color of this instance of that main component to this over here. And again, you're going to want to make sure that these are all consistent. These could be components as well, so that there's no guesswork, but I'm kind of just working quickly, so just to give you guys a bunch of ideas in terms of a layout potential. And then finally, we can duplicate this and change this color to that. And there's some options as well if you want to go, of course, the colorful route. Now, of course, again, if we want to go back to this approach, it's very easy. We can create another variation. So we can take this and we'll keep it along these same lines. So what I'll do is double click into here. We're going to want to actually select both and move them over here. And then we will right align this. Shift R. We'll move this right here. Get these all into line. Select both of these, put this here. And then these are on this line here pretty close already. And then we'll select both of these. You want to make sure everything's in line and with equal white space between the elements. And Shift R to get rid of that. And there we go. This might be a little bit much, having each of these titles be different colors. So if you make that determination, you can add a fill and then just choose to make them all black, for instance. And yeah, as you can see, we've come up with a lot of different potential layouts. I'm going to show you another one real quick before I show you a column-based approach. Sometimes you'll see patterns like this where you have a large illustration. And for this to work, we're going to scale this down. When this happens, we can just take all this and just kind of move it out and then just resize this so that it won't resize those elements inside. And then we'll take everything else and just simply just move them back in. And 1 second, make sure not to select the frame. All right, and then we can continue on. So what I can do is take these, actually all these, move them down. Oop, you might want the head though. All right, And so let's work with this specifically. So what we can do is take this element and then we'll take this element, let's group these up. And again, you want to keep a similar size. And it looks like there's some strange stroke on here, which is interesting to me. I'm trying to figure out what is happening there. Ah, there it is. We just delete that. There we go. And then we'll take this element and take this element and we can put it here. And I'm looking at to see if these are pretty consistently aligned. And this is where it helps to get your rulers. So we can put this here and then align this one right around here. And then we can ensure that everything is lined up correctly. Select both of these and right here. All right, so now we can hide. And you could probably stand to have a little bit more content to fill up this area just a bit more. But this is also an approach that people have used on designs, both for photographs and just illustrations as well, for features and benefit sections. All right, so what if we wanted to, instead of stacking these all in rows, have 3 columns? So that will change things a little bit. So let's go ahead and perhaps we'll take this variation. And it's actually quite easy. So what we can do is we'll take this, we will center it. We'll take this and we're going to change this to pull this out so it's roughly the same width as this element. And we will center it as well. And we'll take our view more and center it there. And then we can push this down. Let's take everything here just to get out of the way. So we'll put this here. And then we will scale this down. And there we go. And so you would do the same thing for the other 3, just to make sure that it is unique. And then we can center those up. And there you go. So as you can see, there are many options, many layout options. I've only just touched on a few of the most common patterns that you find in web layouts. And hopefully you learned something pretty good here about these types of sections. Again, remember, it's all about the fundamentals. It's making sure you have good white space, making sure your contrast is good, your alignment is consistent, and all of that good stuff that you've really already learned about.